Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm super duper excited to be here with you today. And I just want to tell you a quick little story, a quick little something that's been on my mind. And I have no idea what I'm going to call this sucker. There's so many different names I could call it, directions I could take it. But one of the things that I do want to do is maybe a little bit of myth busting or idea busting or whatever. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about in a minute. But first, let me just say thank you so much for spending time with me, for making a choice consciously to tune in and to listen. I super duper appreciate you and getting this opportunity to connect with you through the airwaves, you know? So, okay. Here's the gist of it. Here's the gist of it. I could call this episode something like Life Well Lived. Life Well Lived. Or something about like, like why playing small isn't like, people tell you stop playing small. Like everybody's like, stop playing small. Don't play small. We're going to get it. I'm going to have this all make sense in a minute. But we often hear things like about like, don't play small, like go big or go home. It's all about like going big and going big. And I have met a, a bunch of people over the years who have said things to me like, but what if I don't want to go big? Right? Like some people are destined, right? Some people like come through, they want to be superstars, they want to be on the cover of this, they want to be on stage, they want to be famous, they want to be well known, they want to scale their business, they want to have big cars and big houses and big money and big all this stuff. And then there are some people who really just don't give a shit about all of that stuff. And it was funny because I was just looking at this design like website. I don't know if it was Architectural Digest or whatever it was, but it was this concept about small spaces. And I'm going to connect all this to a life well lived. Just stay with me. I promise I'm going to connect the dots. And it's going to make a difference, I think, especially as we're heading into this new year. So just stay with me, please. I was just reading something, and there was an article, and it basically said this was the tagline on the article of this thing. And it was about small spaces and how to decorate small spaces, right? And this is what it said. It says a small space doesn't have to mean small ideas. And I thought, oh, I really love that. So just because you have a small room, a small bedroom, bathroom, pantry, hallway, whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you have to think small. Like you can like think a little bit wider or bigger, or just, don't have to have small ideas. And then I thought, well, if I just replace two of these words, and instead of saying a small space doesn't have to mean small ideas, I thought to myself, and I'm going to explain why in a minute, a small life doesn't have to mean small impact. A small life doesn't have to mean small impact. Now, let me tell you what I mean by a small life, right? Okay. So recently I found out that a childhood friend, their brother passed away. He was also a childhood friend. He was, though, like 5 or 6 years older than me. And his name was Bobby. And his sister, Michelle, was my sister, Kim, her best friend, one of her best friends growing up. And Michelle spent a lot of time at our house when we were kids, and we spent time over at her house. And we were laughing because she was basically saying, I just remember being at your house all the time. And I said, well, you were at our house a lot. In fact, she lived with us for one whole summer, basically threw her shit in like a garbage bag and like came down the street and just lived with us for like a summer. That's the kind of house we were. That's the kind of mother I had. And, people liked being at that particular house that we lived at because in this particular rental where we rented, we lived right across the street from a park, a park with like the best swings and like the seesaws and the merry-go-round and the big ass slide, the metal slides that would burn the shit out of you. In the summertime, you would get scorched because that thing would get like hotter than the sun. That thing would be like hotter than Hades. Oh my God. Plus, in our rental, we had an in-ground pool. We lived across the park and we had wicked cool. We had a cool mother. Like my mother, like when I tell you when I tell you that my mother's gravitational pull, I say this about myself, but it's just true. My mother's gravitational pull was really strong, and she was beautiful. She was young. She was hip. She was smart. She was funny, and she saw people. And when you were in her presence and her light shone on you, like you felt it. Okay, that's important. Okay, so Michelle's brother Bobby passed away. Now, we did spend time at their house as well. And we were like the annoying little sisters that were like hanging around, and he'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like he'd put up with you and then he'd be like, beat it, because there's a really big difference between when you're like 8 versus when you're like, let's say 14 or whatever. And you're just way too cool for school. And so Bobby loved music. He was cool, like all this stuff. He was cute, but he'd like had enough of his own little sister, never mind the other two that like were hanging around all the time. So I knew Bobby, but I hadn't seen him in like probably like 40 years. But I did stay in touch with his sister. We were still friends on Facebook, and I saw what she was up to and her kids and like all this stuff. So when I got the news, my sister, and we texted each other, and she asked me if I was going to the wake. So we made plans to go down to the wake. Now, we went to the wake last week, and I'm going to tie this all together. Like I said, stay with me. We're coming back to this idea of how a small life doesn't have to mean small impact, right? A small life can be a life well lived. And I'll explain what I mean by small in a minute. So when I get down to the funeral home, for the wake, it was kind of a trip because we used to live, my sister and I, because we rented all over the place, right? We were like the poor kids. We just hopped to wherever the rent was, wherever we were able to get rent or pay rent or whatever, or my mother or whatever could pay rent. So we lived right next door. I mean, literally right next door to this funeral home. So it was kind of a trip to be back in that neighborhood. And so I pulled up, I park out front. I see that there's a line out the door. It's starting to sprinkle a little bit. Thank God it didn't start to rain or snow, whatever, but it was cold out. But people were waiting in line. And my sister wasn't quite there yet. So I start to talk to the woman who was behind me as we're waiting for the door to the building to like open, because the line is so long that it's now spilling out outside onto the sidewalk down the street a little bit. So I start talking to the woman behind me, and she says that her son, right, Bobby, who passed away, he was her son's coach. And her son was either at work or away at school. I didn't quite catch the whole thing. And she said, but he was really upset that he couldn't be here at the wake. So she decided to just come in his stead. Like she's like, I'll go and represent you. And that right there told me something about Bobby. Now, again, this is somebody I hadn't seen in like 40 years or whatever. My sister shows up. It takes about 20 minutes. We're outside for at least 20 minutes. And then we finally get inside, like the door opens. And I see that the line ahead of us has got to be like easily 50 people deep. I mean, this is a long line. And when I tell you that the calling hours were from 4 to 8, but the line started, they told me, at 3:30. People were already lining up outside. And when I tell you that I didn't leave until a little before 8, and the line was still all the way from the front door up to the casket. And it was just one of the most remarkable and impactful things. And I just kept standing there and thinking about, this is a guy who never left his hometown, as far as I knew. Like, now, he might have gone away to college or whatever, but like he lived in his hometown his whole life. He coached, like, if you could see all the pictures, you know how like at funerals and stuff, they put up like the poster board and they put pictures across a person's whole lifetime on them. There were so many of those, and so many of them were covered in like baseball teams and football teams and whatever. So here's a guy, he has 3 kids of his own, married for like 37 years, like wicked long time, never left his hometown. I think he was a Christian, like was involved in his like local church and all this stuff. And he also did stuff for I don't know, like all I know, it's like it involves elderly people and like where they lived. And he would like go and he would plow and he would volunteer and he was on this board and he did all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, I kept thinking about this idea of how people will try to tell you, like, stop playing small. Like, you got to play big. You got to go big or go home. And there are people who are like, but I don't want all of that. I don't want the big cars and the big money and the big house and the big popularity and the fame and the fortune. And I think we get sold some bullshit idea that to live a simple life isn't good enough. That in this capitalistic society, if you don't want to scale things or get more or do more or go big or like, what are you even doing with your life? Like, if you're not wicked ambitious, right? If you don't want to be on the stage and be seen and have a platform and be on all these social media things, like, what are you even doing with your life, right? And it's just a bunch of bullshit. It's so much bullshittery that it's like painful. And this idea just got driven so deeply home as I was standing in this funeral parlor, watching this line and the people and the stories, because I'm a chronic eavesdropper as a writer. I'm a chronic eavesdropper. And the stories that people were telling and the laughter that even his family up at the front of the line, they're like crying, but they're hearing all these stories about their dad and their husband. And it was just one of the most remarkable displays. And I thought to myself, this is a guy who didn't have a fancy job. He didn't leave his hometown. He didn't like go big. I'm not saying like, and this is the point I want to make about like, what does it mean to have a small life? I mean, a small life, like you stay in your hometown. You take care of your people. You go to the same church. You see the same people in your community. You actually are in a community that you participate in, help build, foster. Like there are kids there on those poster boards who were like started playing with him when they were like 5, 6 years old. And now they're out of college going to their first jobs. And I'm thinking, holy shit, like what a legacy. And the amount of love in that room, this person, Bobby, was beloved. He was beloved. And you could just feel it in the room. You could see it in people's faces. You could hear it in their words. Just the energy and the vibe. A small life doesn't have to mean small impact. You can have incredible impact and not do all the big fancy things. And it makes me think about like, let's just, for example, take like the people who are on stage, like the ones who do want to be out front, the ones who do want to, go big, whatever. All of those people are often able to do what they do because there's a bunch of other people who are happy behind the scenes, who don't want to be in front of the camera, who don't want the glory, who don't need their name to be known, who don't need their ego stroked in as big of a way, right? There are the people who are like happy to be in the wings, supporting. And their value and their life is no less important because somebody else might be like, well, they just played small and they stayed small. Now, look, there might be times when we're keeping ourselves small for 1,000 different reasons. And this episode is not that, right? But there might be times when we're playing small out of fear. And I'm not talking about that. If you're somebody who has big dreams and you do want to go for it, right? Like you do want to go for it. There is nothing enlightened about playing small, as Marianne Williamson says, right? You want to go big. And if you're in an environment where other people get uncomfy when you shine a little too bright, they can suck it in a bucket. Let them deal with it, right? But if you're playing small out of fear that other people won't be able to handle it, let them figure it out and handle it. But if you're somebody who's just like, I just want to be, and I don't use the word just condescendingly. They're like, I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. I just want to like raise a family. I just want to be close to my people that I grew up with. I want to blah, 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 blah. I think sometimes that people look at that with a little bit of a condescending attitude. And what I'm trying to say is you can choose to stay local, stay quote unquote small, and still have an incredibly well-lived life, an incredibly impactful life where you change, like your life is a legacy to that town, to your family, to your friends, to all those kids that got coached. Like I'm just thinking about this. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I was there. And it was so remarkable. And it made me so happy for his children that they got to hear all of those stories because, you don't always, you, when you're a kid, you can't always see your parents clearly for good and for bad. We can't always see the places like, sometimes I talked about this in an earlier episode, you put them up on a pedestal, like you do this thing where you don't have quite clear vision. But also sometimes you don't understand their brilliance and their amazingness and the way that they've changed lives, and just listening to all the stories of how many lives Bobby changed. Like, oh my God. And when Michelle saw us, like she didn't know we were there. So we waited. We waited. I'm telling you, this was like a 5-hour line, you guys. It did not stop. People after people after people just showing up. So at some point, it was just like the three children, his wife up by the casket. Michelle went and, our friend took a break. So she didn't know we were there. And when she's sitting with her two sons and we come walking over, and you guys, her face, if you could have seen her face, I wish I've recorded it in my mind, but I wish I could beam it into your brain right now so you could have the same experience. And the way her face, her eyes, she's a beautiful, beautiful girl. I mean, she's a woman, but she's beautiful. And her eyes just lit up and she just like held her face and she kept saying, "Oh my God. Oh my God." And she jumped up and she hugged us and she was crying and we were crying. And it was like this whole thing. And, we got to see her sister and we got to see her mom, and we hadn't seen her mom again, like in 40 years. And her auntie, like, and I'm just like, "Is your mom going to remember us?" And she's like, "Of course." And it was like this whole moment. And it was so deeply impactful to me to see how much impact this one person had. And there's this saying that says like, I think about how one little candle, you put it in front of a mirror and it can reflect a lot of light. It can also light hundreds of other candles. And that's how I think about Bobby, is he was such a powerful light in this little town in Massachusetts, just living his life and trying to do his best to be a good dad, a good husband, a good man, a part of his community. I'm assuming a good Christian based on some of the things that I heard, right? He loved his people and he loved deeply and he was reliable. Like I can't speak for every single like second of the guy's life. But for anybody out there who's listening, who might start to feel like, well, I don't have a big platform, or I don't have a lot of followers, or I don't have a lot of friends, or I don't get a lot of likes, or what I do doesn't matter. Please, please, please do not believe the bullshit that inner critic and maybe some of your family members and what society and everybody's trying to tell you. You matter. You are good enough. You are enough. You are lovable. What you are the light of the world. You too are like a candle that can light up people around you. It doesn't mean you have to go out and go big. But just wherever you are planted right now, wherever you stand, wherever you live, you matter and you can make a difference. And it's just really got me thinking about some things right now. And I think, some of us have really big dreams sometimes, and sometimes they're realistic. I think we should all dream. I think we should allow ourselves to dream big if we want to dream big. I don't think we should put our dreams in small boxes, but not everybody wants the big, big, big jumbo size, the jumbotron, jumbo size life. And your life, instead of being big and wide, it can be close and smaller, but incredibly deep. And I just want to leave you with that as we're moving into this new year. as we're starting to reflect on what we really want. And I know for myself, I really want to simplify. I talk about this every year, but I feel like sometimes there's a little too much going on for my nervous system. And I know myself. I know I have the capacity to be big and go big. And there are some dreams that I have that are pretty big that I'm not going to give up on. And it doesn't mean, if it doesn't happen, that I haven't lived a life well, that I haven't had a well-lived life or a life well lived. And the same is true for you. Now, this doesn't mean that we just give up and we don't go after things and we don't, try to be creative and do big things. If the calling is in your heart, if your internal teacher is pointing to something, if you get lit up around something, follow that. But what lights you up might be that you do a food drive or a clothing drive, or you volunteer at the shelter, or whatever. It doesn't have to be that you're out all the time making $1 gazillion, and everybody wants to be your friend because you're famous or you're special. We're all special, and none of us are special. So I guess, it's I want you to be thinking about what you really want. Be really intentional as you're moving into this new year. And I always say, the universe cannot get behind wishy-washy. It needs us to get some clarity about who we want to be, how we want to be, what really matters to us, what we value, why we're here, why we think we're here, what we're going to do about it with the time that we have. What is that? Because I believe that we all have, as A Course in Miracles tells us, our own individual curriculum. We all have a divine assignment. And those assignments look different for different people. And I don't really give a shit about what everybody else is doing. What most excites me is you getting wicked clear about what you want to be doing, who you want to be doing it with. And these are some of the things that I love to help people with. These are some of the things we talk about in the Nest, in my spiritual group mentoring program. And as you always say, you can find out all the stuff that I'm up to, KarenKenney.com. You want to find out about the Nest, KarenKenney.com/Nest. But you guys, I hope you hear this. I hope I hear from some of you about this episode, because I think we've all been kind of sold a bill of goods that we have to, as individuals, become brands, and we need to keep churning out content for free for these big platforms. Those platforms, people talk about having a platform. No, you don't have a platform. They're the platform, and they're just using you for free content and ad time and ad space. Let's just be honest about what's really going on. But your life is not lived online. Your life is lived right now in the present moment with the people who are in front of you, the animals who are in front of you, the community that's in front of you, the neighbors who are next door, whatever it is. That's where we can be impactful. Who's right in front of you right now, and who needs your help? How can you contribute to your family, to your friends, to your community, to art, to creativity, to the world? What's your contribution? And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale to mean that it doesn't matter. A small life doesn't have to mean small impact. And I'm not saying that Bobby had a small life in a condescending way. I just mean locally, where he lived. He stayed and he went deep, and he had roots, and man, did those roots grow and flourish and seed and create a bounty and a harvest of love that affected thousands. When I tell you how many people, and those were just the people who could come. Those were just the people who, I don't even know. But man, it got me to, I'm like, man, when my time comes, I hope, and it's not so much about leaving a legacy for me because I don't have human children, but I want my legacy to be the love that I shared with people, the way that people felt in my presence. Hopefully at least one book, right? I want to leave a book behind, But I hope with the the time I have left and the air I have left in my lungs, right? The breaths that I have left, that I am making an impact. And it makes me emotional to think about it, that it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see these people in line and to see how beloved my childhood friend was. And just to see the impact that he made. And man, may we all leave behind that much love. I think I'm going to end it here. Wherever you go, may you leave yourself and the people and the place, the animals, the environment better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may you, your presence, your love, your life be a blessing.